Hey friends, I'm RSKT, and in today's video I want to show you how I made my latest design using Affinity Designer on the iPad Pro. Now I know I said in my latest video that the next couple of videos are going to focus on portraits, but I just finished working on this design and I'm really excited to be able to share it with everybody. And let's be real, that last video kind of bombed anyway. No one's really interested in Procreate apparently, but I will be coming back to like digital painting stuff a little bit later on. I actually drew this design way back in 2013 when I first got my hands on a Samsung Galaxy Note 3. I thought it was the coolest phone in the world at the time because I was able to finally draw on the go wherever I went. This is how it turned out. It's pretty basic and I think I drew it in like maybe 10 minutes or something. But yeah, you know, it was always something that I wanted to do a little bit more with. I always thought like it was a really cool character, and at the time I just wasn't that experienced in doing like 2D digital art. Fast forward to today and I have my fair share of industry experience under my belt and I'm finally able to pull something like this off. Before I walk you all through how I went about making this, let me just say two quick things. One, quick shout out to everybody who's subscribed to the channel so far. I managed to hit 500 yesterday and woke up to like 560 something today and it's still going up. Man, that's so cool. You guys are awesome. The second thing I want to mention is if you like the style that you see in this video, feel free to check out my channel. I have a full tutorial in how to paint in this exact method from start to finish. Everybody's been finding it really helpful and I'm still getting people sending me in examples of their work following it. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and let's get started. So even though most of this design is done in Affinity Designer, I actually used Procreate to do up the base sketch. I definitely could have done the base sketch in Affinity Designer like I have done with other projects, but I've been trying to use Procreate a little bit more lately, and I find it really useful for smashing out sketches purely because I scrap so many ideas. It's really easy to just quit and start a new document on the fly when I'm in Procreate. I referenced from my original sketch that I did in 2013, but this time I really wanted to throw in a lot more detail. I was trying to come up with a little bit of a backstory for this character as I went along too. I decided that he was going to be like an alchemist type character where he's doing all these experiments with like different natural elements and whatnot. So up his arms, I'm drawing things like mushrooms growing out of them and little crystal shards in there. I kind of wanted it to look like his experiments were sort of blending the line between what is human and nature. So once I was happy with that, I brought it over to Affinity Designer and got started on the line work. Again, just like I did in my tutorial videos, I'm using Frankentoons brushes for this. Because these are vector brushes, they're actually really easy to just throw down. And I try not to put like a whole lot of time into this because this stage definitely takes the longest. I think I went through listening to like 5 Radiohead albums and at least 3 or 4 Death Grips albums while I was doing this. Let's just say it took a couple of days to fit in on and off around work. I mentioned in my previous videos that I really like having thick outlines around sort of the bulkier shape or the main shapes of my illustrations, but I like to throw in thinner lines for a lot of the details. And you'll probably notice as I go along, this one kind of turned out a little bit different to my others. In my others, I'm actually pretty sparse with the detail because I don't want it to be too cluttered when I start throwing in all my colors and shading. But in this one, I kind of just thought, well, you know, what would happen if I just sort of drew in all of the details that I would if I was working with a pen and paper. I was getting a little bit concerned by the end of the project because there is a lot more line work compared to a lot of my other stuff, but I think it turned out pretty okay by the end. I started drawing in a lot of lines to represent shadows, and I wound up removing a lot of those later on, just because I was a bit concerned that when I started painting in shadows, if some of that line work would get a little lost or a little bit muddied up around all of the darker elements that I'd be throwing in later on. It's pretty amazing how much you can get away with when you're drawing these sort of unnatural creature designs or shapes and whatnot. A lot of the time I've got like a big basic shape down for something I want to get across, like, you know, be it teeth or a badge or a nose or a finger. And then I usually just come in and, you know, I've said it before in a lot of my other videos, I just draw in dots and lines. Usually they're sort of following contours or the shape of something. It's kind of hard to explain because I don't really think a whole lot when I'm doing it. I mentioned in another video before that I've got Tourette syndrome and I've got pretty severe OCD, and some of that obsessive compulsive disorder actually translates into my drawings. So when I'm drawing a line or, you know, a finger or an ear, it doesn't matter if it looks right to me all the time. Sometimes it's about what feels right, or even the direction that my pen was going in while I was drawing it. I put in a lot of these sort of dots and lines to get like a tactile feel for what I'm going for. It's really hard for me to put into words. Sometimes I'll draw something and I think it looks really great, but the feeling of it is just off. It's sort of like not even to me, or something about it. You know, it's that age-old sort of OCD feeling, and I can't really explain it too well, but yeah, it really translates into a lot of my drawing. I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is I basically get the main shape down pat first, and then try not to put too much thought into all of the dots and lines I put everywhere else. I just make sure that it feels right to me. So at this stage, the line work was nearly done, and it had taken me a long time to even get this far. But to be honest, I think the line work is probably the hardest step to get over, because everything else that you do after then is just kind of filling in the blanks. Just like in my tutorial video, now I'm going to start laying down clipping masks. I use the pencil tool to draw in the base color and shape for where I want all of my textured brushwork to be, and I sort of link them all together. So right now I'm doing his ears and his face. They're all separate objects, but eventually I'll just merge them into one, so all of this blue that you're seeing becomes one shape, and then everything I paint within that shape will stay within those bounds. It's a really useful way for me not only to stay organized, but it also allows me to just make sure that none of my textures start overlapping onto other elements that I've already colored in. When I'm laying down these clipping masks as well, I'm kind of just trying to get like a feel for the colors that I would be going for. These can easily be changed later on because all of these shapes are vectors. Because there are so many different colors in this image, there wound up being like a ton of layers. And when you're working on an iPad, it can be really easy to sort of get lost in all of your work. Sometimes I don't really stay that organized. I don't name everything, but for this project, I did. I made a group for all of my line work, and I made a group for all of my clipping masks. And then each one of these colors is on their own layer. So I've got a group within a group for hair, and a group within a group for the skin and the beaker, and so on and so forth. Then when I come in later on and start doing hard shadows, highlights and everything else, I could easily sort of jump back and forth between different elements and quickly toggle them on and off, see what was working and see what wasn't. Cool, so this is what I have with the clipping mask so far. All the base colors are down. At this stage, I kind of couldn't decide whether I wanted the fly traps to be green or to be like this deep, dark, purpley blue. I was kind of seeing how it interacted with the other colors. But yeah, in the end, I definitely went for the purpley blue. Just to give you a quick demonstration of how I'm doing these textures. So I've already laid down like a muddy sort of darker color on this skin. And now I'm just selecting another random texture that I think will look really cool. I select a lighter color and then I'll just gently come in and start painting it onto more prominent areas. I sort of try and lift areas that would be sort of poking out further towards the viewer and leave shadows in dark recessed areas. Because I wanted this beaker to really be glowing, like it was on almost a natural like nuclear potion type substance, I really wanted to try and catch that glow onto a lot of the other areas. So I started painting that glow further around onto things like his skin and his arm and other things sort of within the bounds of it. But later on, I actually wasn't really happy with the color that I had down originally. So I just made a adjustment layer that let me change the hue and saturation a little bit. And then I applied it to everywhere that I'd put that green glow in. Now you can see me painting in some hard shadows. I actually tried to sort of do all of this piece by piece as I went. Normally in the past, I'll do like all of the textures and then all of the hard shadows and then all of the hard highlights. But I kind of went on a case by case basis with this one, just because sometimes sort of working through it all in one big hit can be a bit of a slog. Now I'm painting in those hard highlights as well, just around the straps, skin area. I've still got a lot of texture painting to do everywhere else, but it was kind of cool to get a preview of how this final image is going to look by the time I was finished with it. I was really happy with the way that the mushrooms were growing out of his arm. And for the spots going up his arm, I decided to try and make them replicate the little face badge that he has on his leather straps. I thought it would be kind of cool to see his arm like melting into nature, growing natural substances, but also he's got those crystals in there, and I just kind of wanted it to look like his arm was changing into whatever his surroundings were. So the badge is slowly being imprinted on his arm and the mushrooms are growing out because he's in the forest. Not really putting like a whole lot of thought into it, but I just thought it kind of added like a little bit more of a story element to this picture. While I'm working on illustrations like these, because I'm working on it for so long, it's really fun to try and imagine like entire worlds and scenarios for all of these characters to be a part of. You can get really lost in it, and it's kind of fun. So by this point, his body and all of the elements attached to his body were mostly done. So now it was time to come in and start painting all of the plants hanging around him. So I really started hammering down a lot of textures onto these fly traps. Sometimes it's actually more useful not to paint the textures on, but to just tap them with your finger, and they sort of come out a little bit differently, and that's how I've got this sort of spotty effect going on all of them. I thought it looked really cool, and it just sort of added like a weird sort of alien vibe to whatever jungle he's standing in. Normally I'll put edge highlights on pretty much everything that I paint, but in this one I kind of wanted to use it a little bit sparingly. I did try doing them in different parts of his body and whatnot, but to me it just didn't look right. There was already enough going on with the glowing beaker in his hands, so I just put them on like a few of the leaves and some of the fly traps in the background. You probably noticed too that I actually did outlines for a lot of the leaves here, but if you look at the way I've done leaves in previous illustrations, I usually just leave them as flat vector shapes with no outline at all. I kind of did this on purpose because one day I would like to get some of these designs screen printed, and of course you can't screen print with this level of detail. And I want to do that with my old designs as well, but given the fact that there are flat vector shapes, I would actually have to come back and redraw some of those illustrations just to be able to have them screen printed with just, you know, a few flat colors. In something like this, you can get away with a lot of detail when I get them printed with direct-to-garment printing on a lot of my clothing, and that works fine. And I didn't really want to have to come back to this one. I'm trying to plan a little bit ahead now, but you know, screen printing is going to be a long way away from me. Right now, direct-to-garment is more affordable for what I'm doing. So by this point, the whole picture was pretty much finished. All I had left to do was the background. I used one of Frankensoon's halftone asset packs to sort of throw in this texture and just roughly drew in some leaf shapes behind him, just to sort of make it look like there was more jungle in the background of this image. And then I've got a lot of these sort of floating little dots and shapes around it. It's pretty busy, it's pretty detailed, but without them, I don't know, the image just didn't feel right, and I thought it looked a lot cooler with those. So that is it for me today, everybody. I hope that you really enjoyed the video. If you like, leave a like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe for more, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions. I have a lot planned for this channel. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to go about making the cartoon drawing course. Man, I've shot like the first episode 2 times, and I think I'm gonna rework the whole thing again. It will be out eventually, but don't worry, I still have like a little bit of content planned before I want to release that anyway. I'm thinking it's probably just going to be released the same way I make all of these, 1 video a week, and just sort of fingers crossed and hope for the best. I just want to also quickly mention that this design is now available on t-shirts on my Etsy store. I'm thinking about doing prints. I might even whack it on a hoodie, but for now, there's 2 shirts up there. So if you really like it, feel free to check it out. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.